Do you smell the iron in the air? That is the scent of solitude's hunger. It is not a quiet thing. It does not whisper. It devours. Somewhere between silence and shadow, between the pulse of your heartbeat and the edge of dreams, there lies a truth no mortal was meant to learn too easily. You were never meant to belong to the crowd. From the moment you arrived in this world, wet, screaming, untouched by memory, you carried a code etched into your very bones. Not the code of survival or of society, but of transcendence. And the first key to unlock it? Aloneness, not loneliness, the desperate ache for company, but solitude, the sacred chamber where the soul remembers its name. Yet we have been taught to fear it, to chase noise, to worship distraction, to suffocate in the comfort of constant contact. But why? Because solitude reveals the raw self. It shows you your own reflection, unfiltered. And for many that sight is too terrible to bear. But for the ancient ones, for the mystics, sages, and alchemists, solitude was the forge where the false self was burned away, and the divine self was reborn. The ancients did not fear solitude. They built temples for it. They traveled deserts to find it. They sat beneath stars not to escape, but to remember. This is not a video. This is a summoning. In the next few moments, you'll walk through forgotten chambers, decode ancient codes, and witness the transformation that comes when the soul is no longer distracted, but awakened. We will uncover the buried roots of sacred aloneness in the scrolls of Egypt, the caves of the Essenes, and the silent chambers of Eastern monasteries. We will unmask the rituals the ancients used to alchemize their solitude into wisdom, into clarity, into power. And finally, we will meet those who faced this abyss and came back as something more. So are you ready? Because once you hear what solitude truly is, you will never look at your own silence the same again. Long before the noise of modern life, when empires were young and stars were still gods, solitude was not punishment. It was preparation. The priests of Heliopolis would not speak for 7 years before they were allowed to utter the names of the gods. The silence was not enforced. It was invited. They believed that to speak the sacred, one must first be emptied of the profane. Solitude, to them, was the antechamber of divinity. This wasn't exclusive to Egypt. The Vedic sages would retreat to the forest, to the Aranya, where they shed all roles, father, teacher, warrior, and became seekers of Atman, the undivided self. Alone, they drank from the well of silence and wrote verses that still ripple through the ages. The Essenes, a mystical sect near the Dead Sea, lived in structured isolation, not as hermits in despair, but as surgeons of the spirit. Their scrolls speak of the still flame, a state only achieved when the outer world has been silenced and the inner world brought into alignment. Even the Greeks, whose love for reason birthed modern thought, understood this. Pythagoras, more mystic than mathematician, demanded years of silence from his disciples. They were not permitted to ask questions, only to listen. Only in solitude could the music of the spheres be heard. The harmonic code said to govern the universe itself. And what of the desert fathers of early Christianity, or the Taoist sages who sat by mountain rivers for decades? Each one knew a secret modern society forgets. When you are truly alone, the world begins to speak. Solitude was not escape. It was initiation. They called it the second birth, a ritual rebirth not of flesh, but of essence, a conscious disentangling from the web of collective identity. It was through aloneness that one learned to distinguish the echo from the voice, the mask from the face. And there is one relic buried beneath the sands near Abydos that proves this was no metaphor. A polished black tablet, obsidian and smooth as water, etched with the glyph of the Ojat, the eye of inner seeing. Scholars dismissed it as ornamental, but initiates knew better. This was the mirror of Sheut, the mirror of shadow. The initiate would gaze into it alone, without food, without speech, sometimes for days. In the reflection, they saw every lie they had ever believed about themselves, and every truth they had buried. Those who survived the vision were said to emerge with eyes that glowed in moonless nights and hearts that could not lie. So understand this: when you stand alone, trembling in your own silence, you are not lost. You are exactly where the ancients began. Solitude is not simply the absence of others. It is the presence of something far more potent. An alchemical transformation occurs when the soul stands unaccompanied. And this is no mystical fantasy. The ancients, in their profound wisdom, embedded sacred science into the very fabric of solitude. Let us begin with the most ancient symbol, the Ankh. What you may believe to be merely a cross with a loop at the top is, in truth, a diagram of the human energy system. The vertical line represents the spiritual axis, the breath of life that descends into the body. The loop, once thought a simple adornment, is the symbol of the Ka, the soul's vehicle. In solitude, the Ka can be recharged, recalibrated. It is no coincidence that many esoteric teachings recommend solitary fasting, for the ancient understanding of fasting was not to starve the body, but to cleanse the soul's vessel, much like clearing the reed pipes of an ancient wind instrument, allowing the true breath to sound clearly. In the labyrinth of solitude, your mind has the opportunity to step back from the static of external noise and tune into a higher frequency. Think of the rituals of the Druids or the Zoroastrian fire temples. The fire, a physical and cosmic symbol of divine light, was not just a beacon of warmth. It was an invitation to the stillness beyond the flickering flames. One of the greatest alchemical secrets lies in understanding the principle of polarity, the hermetic law that dictates all things exist in pairs, light and dark, male and female, silence and sound. Alone, you enter the sacred space where polarity ceases to be a conflict and instead becomes a balance, a symbiosis. It is in this sacred silence that you learn the rhythm of your own heart, the heartbeat of the universe. And the moment you stand fully in alignment with this beat, you hear it, the music of the spheres. As the ancients whispered, the heavens sing to those who listen. But how do we truly listen? The answer lies in a forgotten art, the art of stilling the mind. The Vedic sages called it dhyana, a form of meditation so pure that the practitioner ceases to exist as an individual and becomes the breath, the thought, the pulse of all creation. Modern science, though it may scoff at the metaphysical, is slowly catching up to this truth. Recent studies show that sustained periods of silence activate the default mode network in the brain, an area responsible for self-reflection, creativity, and intuition. The ancients called this the eye of the soul. the ability to peer beyond the veil. And so, in the alchemy of solitude, the science is clear. When you allow the mind to be still, you create the perfect conditions for transformation. The alchemists of old spoke of turning base metals into gold, but they knew a greater secret. The true transmutation is not of metals, it is of the spirit. The chamber of drowned gods, an ancient temple deep in the deserts of Egypt, is said to be the site where the soul could enter the underworld and return transformed. It wasn't a physical place alone that held power, but the inner journey it invoked. The silence there was so absolute that the mind was forced to confront its deepest fears and then transcend them. This is the sacred science hidden in solitude, to face the darkness within and, like the phoenix, to rise from the ashes. In silence, the ancient alchemists discovered that the greatest gold is not of metal, but of wisdom. The greatest transformation is not the body, but the soul. The true proof of this wisdom is found not only in texts and symbols, but in the deeds of those who walked before us. They were the sages, the seers, the leaders who embraced solitude not as a prison, but as the crucible of their greatest works. Their journeys are etched in time, and their triumphs speak to us across millennia. One such figure was Imhotep, the ancient Egyptian priest and polymath. Imhotep's wisdom was forged in silence, and from it, he birthed not only the foundations of medicine, but the principles of holistic healing that still guide modern practitioners today. His greatest revelation? The power of retreat, of removing oneself from the distractions of the world to receive the divine messages of the universe. Imhotep's solitude was a gateway through which he could align his body and spirit with the divine. And in doing so, he unlocked a power that transcended human understanding. In his time of retreat, it is said that Imhotep spoke with the gods themselves, gaining insights that led him to design the first pyramid, a symbol not just of engineering brilliance, but of spiritual ascension. The steps leading to the heavens were not merely architectural. They were symbolic of the path one must walk in solitude to reach the heights of divine understanding. And this journey was not for the faint of heart. It required courage, the courage to face oneself, to be alone with the silence that reveals the soul's deepest secrets. In every legend, in every myth, solitude is the birthplace of wisdom. The temples, the sacred spaces, the hidden scrolls, all were sanctuaries where the most powerful transformations occurred, away from the prying eyes of the world. This is the inheritance passed down through the ages, the proof that solitude is not a punishment, but a sacred invitation to rise beyond the self. You may think that solitude is merely the absence of others, a void, a space where you are left to linger in silence. But you are mistaken. Solitude is not emptiness. It is the most profound form of presence. It is the forge where the soul is tempered and the mind sharpened. Those who have dared to walk into the silence have found not loneliness, but the company of the infinite, the voice of the universe that whispers truths to only those who listen. But beware, solitude is not a passive state. It is not the quiet comfort of retreat. It is a trial. The alchemy of solitude transforms, but the process is not without its cost. It will strip you of your illusions, shatter your ego, and expose the parts of you that are most vulnerable. It is a fire, and like all fires, It does not discriminate. You may think that the courage to be alone will bring you peace. But know this, it is not peace you seek. It is power, and power once awakened is never a passive force. It is a hunger, and it knows your name. If you have the courage to face this truth, then take your first step into the silence. And if this journey calls to you, subscribe now. The path is long, but the wisdom you seek awaits.